Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe has resigned, Parliament Speaker Jacob Mudenda has said. A letter from Mr. Mugabe said the decision was voluntary and he had made it to allow a smooth transfer of power. The surprise announcement halted an impeachment hearing that had begun against him and sparked wild celebrations on the nation's streets. The ruling ZANU-PF party says former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa will succeed Mr. Mugabe, in power since 1980. Mr. Mnangagwa's sacking earlier this month triggered a political crisis. It had been seen by many as an attempt to clear the way for Grace Mugabe to succeed her husband as leader and riled the military leadership, who stepped in and put Mr. Mugabe under house arrest. After the resignation announcement, lawmakers roared in jubilation. Follow the latest developments here. Robert Mugabe, hero or villain? Mr. Mugabe, 93, was until his resignation the world's oldest leader. He had previously refused to quit despite last week's military takeover and days of protests. According to the constitution, his successor should be the current vice president, Felix Mfoko, a supporter of Grace Mugabe. But ZANU-PF chief Wiplove Murmatuk told Reuters news agency that Mr. Mnangagwa would be in office within 48 hours. Speaking from an undisclosed location earlier on Tuesday, Mr. Mnangagwa said he had fled abroad 2 weeks ago when he learned of a plot to kill him. Let him rest in his last days. UK Prime Minister Theresa May said Mr. Mugabe's resignation provides Zimbabwe with an opportunity to forge a new path free of the oppression that characterized his rule. She said that former colonial power Britain, as Zimbabwe's oldest friend, will do all it can to support free and fair elections and the rebuilding of the Zimbabwean economy. Opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai told the BBC he hoped that Zimbabwe was on a new trajectory that would include free and fair elections. He said Mr. Mugabe should be allowed to go and rest for his last days. In other reaction, the U.S. Embassy in Harare, the capital, said it was a historic moment and congratulated Zimbabweans who raised their voices and stated peacefully and clearly that the time for change was overdue. South Africa's main opposition Democratic Alliance welcomed the move, saying Mr. Mugabe had turned from liberator to dictator. Prominent Zimbabwean opposition politician David Coulthard tweeted, "We have removed a tyrant but not yet a tyranny." Civil society group The Platform for Concerned Citizens called for dialogue between all political parties, which it said should lead to the formation of a national transitional authority. Robert Mugabe won elections during his 37 years in power, but over the past 15 years these were marred by violence against political opponents. How Zimbabwe is celebrating Mugabe's long career in pictures. How UK-Zimbabwe relations went sour. He presided over a deepening economic crisis in Zimbabwe, where people are on average 15% poorer now than they were in 1980. However, Mr. Mugabe was not forced out after decades in power by a popular mass movement but rather as a result of political splits within his ZANU-PF party. The leader of the influential Liberation War Veterans, former allies of Mr. Mugabe, said after the army takeover that Mr. Mugabe was a dictator, who as he became old, surrendered his court to a gang of thieves around his wife. The polarizing Grace Mugabe. Emmerson Mnangagwa, the crocodile who snapped back. Zimbabwe in 10 numbers. Yet despite huge demonstrations in the streets celebrating what seemed like his impending demise, Robert Mugabe had until now refused to step down. It has happened. His decision to finally resign sparked joy in the streets. "We are just so happy that things are finally going to change," Togo Ntlalambi, a hairdresser, told the AFP news agency. "I am the happiest person under the sun right now, because I always believed that Mugabe was going to step down in my lifetime and it has happened," human rights activist Linda Mazzariro told the BBC. "And now going forward it's time for the opposition to reorganize and ensure that we will have a government that cares for the people. And everyone has to be included." 1924, born. 1964, imprisoned by Rhodesian government. 1980, wins post-independence elections. 1996, marries Grace Marafu. 2000, loses referendum, pro-Mugabe militias invade white-owned farms and attack opposition supporters. 2008, comes second in first round of elections to Morgan Tsvangirai, who pulls out of runoff amid nationwide attacks on his supporters. 2009, amid economic collapse, swears in Mr. Tsvangirai as Prime Minister, who serves in uneasy government of national unity for 4 years. 2017, sacks longtime ally Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa, paving the way for his wife Grace to succeed him. Army intervenes and forces him to step down.